When I first started to improve my setup, I was aiming to ease myself into the home office settlement, something I hoped was only temporarily, but I still feared that I would be homebound for longer than expected. I was using a Logitech Craft along with Dynamics Master 3 at the time, pretty happy with what I had. I was looking more at getting a new table or chair, maybe a bigger monitor. I believed that my then peripherals were probably one of the best lineups imaginable. After all, it was the dream combo I always wanted. Well, it's 2021 now, and I can't imagine ever typing on a chiclet style board again. The Keychron has been one of my biggest surprises. I would have never given this much thought or expected this much value from my typing experience. But despite being very satisfied with the purchase, I still ended up placing an order for a thermal. Here's why. I always was a sucker for necessary gadgets, and I'm easily distracted by shiny objects. But when I first stumbled upon the mechanical keyboard craze, my initial reaction was,
why? Why not? She's good.
It's not that I wasn't familiar with mechs. I spawned from an age group that was still heavily babied with mechanical instruments, and I'm sure I've spent several hours in school typing away on something that would be considered supremely prestigious these days, depending on who you ask, of course. But I couldn't grasp the reason as to why. I couldn't figure out what was supposedly so special about them. Back in the olden days, when I was a youngster, we all had mechanical keyboards. It was the only way.
This is the way.
Over the years, chiclet-style switches started to become more popular. At first, they were considered an ugly creation out of necessity. Nowadays, they've garnered mainstream appeal and have long reached the shores of pretty much every machine, laptop or desktop. So I thought this must be one of those retro craft fads that makes the rounds every now and then. Can't be that there's actually something behind it, right? I didn't want to give in to the fad at first. I refused the idea of mechanical resistance against my fingertips. But then I came across the keycaps. Needless to say, I was hooked. I wanted to get in on that, so I took the plunge, with restraints of course. My thought was, since I was spending more time at home and would want to pick up some occasional gaming, a gaming keyboard would make sense. It wasn't just for vanity, no, it had practical reasoning behind it.
Logical.
Additionally, there was the promise of macro programming, something which sent a tingly sensation down my video editing spine, as well as the potential to increase my productivity at the office, enhancing my contribution as a well-oiled cog.
All right, kids, gather around, and now, observe.
I ended up setting for the Logitech G Pro, a 10 keyless board, reduced but still with everything I needed. With this choice, I would be shielded off from temptation, would be saved from falling too deep into the rabbit hole that is mechanical keyboards, avoiding another unnecessary obsession. Or so I thought. I was wrong.
You were the chosen one!
There's nothing inherently wrong with the Pro. It's actually a really good board, apart from the micro B connector, which needs to burn in hell. I used it for a couple of months before my keycaps arrived. Unfortunately though, there was a problem. I didn't do my homework and I had to find out the hard way that the G Pro uses non-standard key sizes, meaning that some keycaps didn't fit, like the caps lock for example or the spacebar. After a few months I couldn't stare at it anymore. Something had to change. I restarted the hunt and the choice of going full custom still seemed a bit risky. I wasn't sure about the selection of PCBs, the soldering or the various compatibility and software requirements to get the thing running. So I started to look at the pre-built department, and after much thought I settled on YouTube's favorite and went for the K6.
And I gotta tell you, it feels phenomenal.
I wasn't expecting it to be this good, to be honest. I know people have been raving about it, but I was genuinely surprised by just how much you get for 89 bucks. I picked the K6 simply because I thought it looked best, and even with its compact size, it still retains enough keys to never feel like you're out of control. I got the hot swappable RGB version. Depending on your choices, you can go as low as 69 bucks. It'll give you a soldered white backlight version along with your switch of choice. If you spring for a fully custom board, you can easily spend a couple of $100 just for the case itself. As mentioned, I was pretty surprised by just how good it is. There are a few oddities though. There is no official software for the Keychron, but you can use something called sharp keys for Windows to change the bindings. This allows you to replace almost any button on the board except for the function and the light key at the top right. This is also where the delete button would normally go, which I do dearly miss. There are also two modifiers that are used to access the F keys, or any other special functionality. In the end, I left most as it was, except for the home, page up and down key, replacing them with play, next and previews, as I suffer from a chronic skip track disorder. The board is also wireless and in my case lasted for about 3 weeks before shutting down. There is unfortunately no warning before the battery dies. By default, the board will also go to sleep after 10 minutes of no use. The duration can't be adjusted, but you can turn it off completely. Also keep in mind that once the board is disconnected, it will take a few seconds to reconnect. This is Bluetooth after all and not your Logitech Lightning connector. I also have been having a repeating issue that at least once per day one key would get stuck for a few seconds. Not physically, but the board would become unresponsive. I'm not sure if this is caused by a lousy Bluetooth connection or something else. Moving over to the hardware, the build quality is superb. It has to be noted though that I picked the metal version of the K6, which does make the board a bit heavier, but not by much, and I think it looks a bit nicer with a slightly chunkier frame. It's a wraparound too, so the basic case is still plastic. The pieces slide right off, and when you put them back together, make sure you don't over tighten the screws. You'll end up skewing the corners. Replacing the keycaps was also a breeze, and everything fit neatly onto the board. I also changed the spring on the spacebar with one from the Kale Brown switch, reason being that it felt a bit too easy to push down. This might be because of the slightly heavier keycap though. Playing around with the Keychron made me realize that putting together a custom board might not be as hard as I initially thought. I've watched countless build videos at this point, but never did it occur to me that it was this easy. Now, keep in mind, I haven't actually built one yet. If you ask me, the Keychron is an almost perfect board for its price, especially considering the feature set and its flexibility. Besides that, there is another reason that makes it an immensely compelling choice. You can actually buy it. So if you're in the market for a new keyboard, a mechanical keyboard, or are curious at what all the fuss is about and you're impatient like me, that is, you don't want to wait for up to a year or even more for your Kickstarter, I mean group buy, look no further than Keychron. I might sound like a broken record at this point, but I can't stress this enough. For 69 bucks, you really get a lot of bang for your buck. But beware, it might get you hooked on a lot more than you initially asked for. And now, for the obligatory typing sounds.